A wonderful welcome once again to the program, The Law Gallery, coming to you from the Lagos studios of KAFTAN Television. Khalid, Bada is my name, and as you know, I have interesting packages lined up for your delight today. So today we'll be talking about human rights, particularly the freedom of information, freedom to life, and every other freedom we have to enjoy as people. Now, for clarification purposes, human rights are said to be moral principles or norms relating to certain standards of human behavior and are regularly protected by local and international law. They are generally understood as inviolable fundamental rights that man is inherently entitled simply because he is human, regardless of age, ethnic origin, place of residence, language, or religion. And now it is understood to be unique to all human beings, ethnicity, and other status. Now, they are egalitarian in the sense that they apply everywhere, at all times, and in the sense of universality, are equal for all. And they are understood to require empathy and the rule of law, impose an obligation on individuals to respect the human rights of others, and are generally removed only after due process because of specific circumstances. Now today we have Awolu Itunuoluwa. Did I get it right?
Absolutely correct.
Yes, thank you very much. We have Awolu Itunuoluwa, and I'll be engaging her in the discussion of human rights in Nigeria, the freedom of information in Nigeria, and every other freedom we have. But before we do that, let's take our news updates on the program for today. We'll be back.
Hello and welcome to the news update on the Law Gallery. My name is Esther Agbo. The eagerly anticipated 63rd edition of the Annual General Conference of the Nigerian Bar Association, NBA AGC, is set to take place from August 25 to September 1, 2023 at the MKO Abiola Stadium in Abuja. The event was officially announced during a press conference in Abuja on Monday, May 15, 2023, where the conference theme was unveiled and the registration portal was launched. During the press conference, President of the NBA, Mr. YC Michael OON introduced the members of the planning committee, attendees, and the IT consultants for the 2023 conference. He subsequently inaugurated the registration portal, urging members to commence their registration process through the website www.nbaconference.com. However, since the commencement of the registration process, some delegates have reported experiencing technical difficulties, which have impeded their progress. These concerns have been brought to the attention of the 2023 Conference Planning Committee, who are diligently addressing the issues and providing assurances that they will be resolved promptly. In another story, the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Finance Committee, RMAFC, has approved a 114% increase in the salaries of elected and appointed officers. The Commission also introduced 3 new allowances to the Judge Benefits Package. There were strong signs from Minna, Niger's capital, that federal states will regulate salary increases for political and legal workers. A federal member of the Commission representing the state of Niger, who presented a report yesterday to Niger Governor Abubakar Sani Bello, said many variables were used in the preparation of the new reports, particularly the general economic situation, and said public opinion was used. He left other officials' remunerations unchanged, but said that special consideration was given to judicial staff due to the nature of their duties, adding that 3 remuneration for judicial staff had been introduced. Among the 3 benefits, Shettima said professional development assistance to enable judges to employ 2 clerks as researchers, a seniority allowance to protect seniority, and a restricted living allowance, rice field. He explained that the new remuneration report, published 15 years after the last review in 2008, has 4 volumes. Shettima announced that some of the domestication would have to go through the legislative process of the state legislature. Moving on, the Constitution Review Committee has on Tuesday, 23rd May, called on members of the legal profession to share their ideas on the ongoing constitutional review process so as to ensure that the Constitution align with its objectives, international best practices and current realities. In line with the provisions of Section 25 of the Constitution of the Nigerian Bar Association 2015, as amended in 2021, the committee is hereby calling on all esteemed members of the Nigerian Bar Association for proposals and contributions towards the ongoing constitution review exercise. Moving on to the next story, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, and the National Institute of Justice, NJI, are strengthening their cooperation to strengthen electronic payments platforms, attract investors, and generally strengthen the economy. The two agencies are hosting a workshop for bailiffs and other stakeholders to familiarize them with the Apex Bank's mission and operations and other latest developments in the financial ecosystem. Delivering a keynote address at the opening of the seminar for judiciary officials in Abuja, CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele said that the event themes and subtopics are expected to consider issues as the duties and activities of the CBN. CBN's banking relationships with the federal government and commercial banks, glitches in Nigeria's foreign exchange market, the payment system vision 2025, as well as the banking verification framework and its impact on electronic fraud. He added that the topics and subtopics of the workshop are relevant to Apex Bank's current efforts to achieve stability in the financial and microeconomic system and to seek a diversified economy. And that's all we have for you on the news update on the Law Gallery for today. I am Esther Agbo.
Welcome back to the program. It's still the Law Gallery coming to you from the Lagos studios of KAFTAN Television. And before we went for the break, I promised you that I'll be coming back with Awolu, Itunuoluwa, whom I will be engaging in the discussion of human rights in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate your time. Yeah. Now, into the discussion, as you're a legal practitioner, yeah? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that you've had series of experiences about human rights violation, perhaps the right to life or rights to information or whatever other right we have. Now, which of these human rights violations, cases of human rights violations, would you actually say is the most common one that we have? Is it life? Is it information? And focusing on Nigeria now.
Okay, so I think when you say common right, it would depend on the level of reports that you get. Now, take for instance, if you look at the right to life, it is easy for you to get a report because so many people will have to talk about it that someone's life has been taken. But when it comes to torture, sometimes because the victim is unable to probably provide evidence as at the time that he or she now has access to talk to someone to say, oh, this was what I went through or this was what happened to me. So if there's no evidence to prove it, most times people just, keep it to themselves, right? And then when you also look at information, most times you don't even try to clamor for it or ask for it. When it comes to which one is more prevalent, we'll look at the reports or the data that we even have. And I think that is why it is even difficult to ascertain which one is actually prevalent. Now, if you look at the right to life, it is, it's a major thing when someone dies, when a life is taken. A lot of people will come out and clamor about it, and then we'll talk about Black Lives Matters, we'll talk about police brutality and all of that. But when you look at, say, freedom of association or freedom of information, sometimes people don't even want to fight for it. People don't want to, we are quick to move on with life and just neglect it. So, but to answer your question, I think I would say maybe right to dignity of human person, and that is where you are looking at torture and inhuman treatments. So we realize that most of these people go through so many inhuman or degrading treatments at the police station and even at correctional facilities. Yes, so from my line of work, I mean, that's the one that I'm more conversant with, and that's where we've gotten more reports from.
So we would actually blame the lack of succinct data to people not actually talking.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then when you even look at Nigeria, right, when people are even bold enough to come out to talk, sometimes people even, you know, go to court, but they are not so convinced as to the report that they get. You get judgment from the court, and then implementation becomes an issue. You have to go back to court again to implement that judgment that you have gotten. So when people now look at the circumstances around you even speaking out and the result that you get, it's they are reluctant or they are discouraged from even speaking out, and then we just, you know, we are quick to like just move on with life like it's Nigeria.
Talking about speaking out, we all saw what happened in 2020, talking about the NSAS protest, when people actually came out to, you know, talk about the police brutality, talk about what they want from the government and what, you know, they don't want happening in the society. However, there was a vivid tramplation of their rights. We saw cases where they were actually attacked by, you know, officers of the security agencies, including the army, the police and all. And up till now, the court only condemned that action. The court condemned it, and there was no legal injunction to back that. Is it that it is out of the jurisdiction of the courts, or I really don't know?
Okay, so it is not out of the jurisdiction of the court, but when cases or matters have to do with the people and the government, or, you know, law enforcement agencies, they are the government parastatal. So it's like an individual or a group of people coming against the government. Sometimes it is a little bit difficult because even the judiciary is also part of the government, right? So they can make proclamations and say, okay, this is what we want to do. Now look at the issue of the change of the naira now, right? The court made a decision that the old naira note should remain with the new note. And you know, it took a while before we were able to see that implementation come. And that is from the Supreme Court. Naturally, you expect that immediately that was said, it would take effect immediately. But it took a while. Now, imagine if that happens at the Supreme Court. When you now come down to the lower court, you come down to the High Court, you come down to the Court of Appeal. So sometimes we are only left with the avenue or the opportunity to now get to continue litigation until you get to the Supreme Court. So if a High Court gives a decision and say, okay, the government should pay compensation to this person for causing this person injury or for taking infringing on the rights of this person, and then it is not obeyed, that court can't do anything. So you will be left with the option of going to the you'll be left with the option of coming back to that court and say, okay, the court should now to help you execute that judgment. And sometimes it's hard because who is the court going to hold responsible? Will the court go and pick the president and say, because you are the senior citizen or you are the head of the state, then you should be able to talk to these people? To, you know, sometimes people just get frustrated and just abandon, even when they have rights that they can, you know, take up, they just abandon them and just, like I said, move on with life. Now,
for a layman and just out of curiosity, is there any situation where the court has nothing to do, where the court can actually do nothing, just to observe, other than to observe?
Well, I don't.
Just out of curiosity.
No, I don't believe there's any situation where the court can't do anything, because at the end of the day, we all put our hope in the courts. We put our hope in the judiciary. When the legislation mess up, when the executive mess up, we go back to the courts for recourse. So I don't want to believe there's any situation where the court can't do anything. Now, the only thing that we can have is where we have members of the judiciary, people, members of the judiciary who are unwilling to do anything.
Any case where the court is actually helpless, where, they actually can't do anything after passing a particular judgment, and, such person refuses to adhere to such ruling.
Okay, so the court is said to be the hope of the common man, right?
Sure.
So even when you have members of the legislature messing up, members of the executive messing up, you can always go back to the judiciary. Yes. So I don't think there's any situation or there's any case where the court can ever be helpless. However, you can only have a situation whereby, maybe due to corruption, right, some members may not want to act. Not that they are helpless and they can't act. Of course, they can always act.
Now, just by the way, yeah, the Lagos State Magistrate Court on Wednesday declined the request by the police to arraign and prosecute the Afrobeat musician Shehu Kuti. The Chief Magistrate Court, the Chief Magistrate rather, Adeola Olatunbosun, held that the police could not be the complainant and the prosecutor at the same time. Hence, ordered that the case file should be handed over to the Lagos Directorate of Public Prosecution to give a directive. Now, could you shed more light on this? I actually read the report, but I feel we should actually talk about it so that people would understand what is really going on in that scene. Now, the police can be the complainant and the prosecutor at the same time. Yeah. Is that like a legal thing, or is it just that? Is it a case of...
So you cannot be a judge in your own case, right? So you are saying, and that is why you have the prosecution, you have the defendant, and then you have the complainant, right? So if you are the complainant, you are the prosecution, it's like you are doing everything on your own, right? It's like there is no neutrality in that. Now, what they could have done is that particular case, if the police officer involved, right, naturally is a complainant, because the right that was infringed was not the right of the police as a body. It was the right of that particular police officer, individual that was assaulted, right? So if that particular police officer had, if he had gone on in his, if the action had been, the charge has been brought in his own name, right, in his own name, then it will be easier. But if you are now painting it in such a way to say that the crime that has been committed is against the police as a body, no, it doesn't make sense. It won't fly.
Anyway, I thank you for that clarification. Now, our major focus is actually the violation of human rights and the right to information in Nigeria. Now, would you say there's been any positive development in the recent years, looking back at what we used to have maybe 5 years ago to what we have now? Would you actually say there's been a development?
Okay, so if we look at 10 years ago, right, we had, in 2011, we had the Freedom of Information Act passed, right? But if you look at, with the existence of that act, you will see that many states have not even domiciled that act. Right. So when you look at the different cases that have been taken to court, in some states, they will say because they have not domesticated that particular act, it shouldn't be applicable to them, which is absolutely wrong, because whenever an act is passed, it is applicable to all states until it is domesticated in that state. So take, for instance, we have the Freedom of Information Act, right, which naturally is applicable to all states in Nigeria. So if Lagos State today now decides that, okay, let's make our own Freedom of Information law, then that Freedom of Information law will be the one applicable to Lagos State. So until we now have that in each state, the one that is already in existence, which is the federal one, is applicable to all states. But you will see that most states are still reluctant as to domesticating that particular act. And then we've seen different court cases whereby in some states, the court will decide and say that, okay, the act is applicable to all states. And then in some other, you see that the court will say, no, it is not applicable, even at the Court of Appeal. So different court decisions, and then, I've not seen any decision that has gone to the Supreme Court, because until you get to the Supreme Court before you say, okay, this is the one that is applicable. So if you go to any ministry in Lagos State and then you ask for their budget, you make an application under the Freedom of Information Act, and you say, okay, let's see your budget. They can tell you, no, we are not going to show you, because that Freedom of Information Act is not applicable in Lagos State. And they are doing that because they know that some courts have even passed that law, has decided to say that it is not applicable to states. But they are not going to hold on to the decisions of court that have said that it is applicable to all states. So we are not making progress. To answer your question, we are still far back, and it's not even letting us see the importance of what that law is meant to do. So we are not even seeing it even as citizens. What's the point of having a law that you cannot easily implement?
Now, we can't talk about the right to information without talking about the right of the press.
Yeah.
Now, in 2021, 2022 rather, the Press Freedom Index ranked Nigeria 123 out of 180 countries ranked based on the freedom of the press enjoyed in such country. Now, we are still struggling with the press. We have the NBC, and the NBC is always sanctioning, I'm sure you're aware of that, but recently there was an injunction by the court that that bans the NBC from actually banning, media organizations. Now, don't you think that is actually long overdue?
Okay, it is, and it also takes me back to the fact that we have that act. It has stated exactly or expressly how information should be gotten, and then you also have the Constitution that has provided for freedom of expression and the press, right? So the press have so that you avoid the issue of corruption, so that you can hold the government accountable. That is why you have that section of the Constitution making that right is a fundamental right which no one should breach. But because of corruption, because we are not like truly open to accountability and all, that is why you see some of these sanctions. Because even when you look into some of the sanctions, right, there will be no true basis for them. It is just out of bias to maybe a party or maybe a belief or maybe an institution or an organization that the press is trying to, speak against. And the essence of the Constitution, making it a fundamental right, is so that people, citizens, humans, we have access to all of the information being made by people who are governing them, or where decisions are to be made that can affect their life. So they should naturally be able to access such information in due time. So, and that is why it is important to have the press. Now, when we now consistently have sanctions, and then the press is also scared of giving out information, so where will the common man go to get information? So I think it is long overdue, and I hope that and I hope that we have the government looks into how the Freedom of Information Act can be fully implemented, and also that media houses are also bold enough, right, to also go forward, go to court, and litigate some of these things, so that when you get to litigate and then you get compensation, and then the court rules to say, okay, you can't actually ban them for this, or you don't have the right to do this, you don't have the power to do that. It will also encourage more media houses to do their job in all fairness.
However, I've been in conversation with people over time, and they always talk about the fact that the 1999 Constitution particularly has a way of, should I say, going back on its words. Let's say it gives a ruling saying the Freedom of Information Act is this. Then when you get to another section of the Constitution, it kind of contradicts what has been said earlier. Have you seen cases of that?
No, I haven't. So what I know is that, under every rule, there are exceptions. So when you make a general rule, and these laws are made preempting, they are not made when issues arise. They are made for the future, right? So when you make a general rule and you don't put exceptions to it, it will make it too stringent, right? So when you have the rule that says, okay, you have the right to express yourself, the press have the right to have media houses, to run media houses, they can share information, people can share opinion and all of that. There has to, and you also, there have to be a caveat to say, to what extent can you exercise this right? To what extent can you exercise the right? So maybe that is what, people see to say it is going back. I don't see it as going back. I think it's just ensuring that you have that right to express yourself, you have the right to the press, to use media to share information, give opinion and all of that. In doing that, you shouldn't also commit any crime. In the sense that if I have access to someone's personal details, right? And I go on media and I start sharing that person's personal, it is an infringement of that person's right to private life, private and family life. I'm infringing on that person's privacy. So it is not because, so now if you are looking at the fact that I have the right to expression, you have the right to the press, and we are using that, we are exercising that right. In exercising that right, we should also ensure not to infringe on any other rights that has been provided.
But don't you think these loopholes, I would like to call it, are the reasons we've not actually advanced in, you know, our fight for a free environment, a free press environment? Because I've had a personal experience where I tried conducting an interview on in the premises of an government organization here in Lagos, and I was actually arrested for doing that, even though I was not actually talking about whatever they were doing there. I was not, you know, requesting any information, just because I was close to the premises, and I was actually arrested. Don't you think these are the reasons why we still have these things happening? Because if you're going to talk about it, they will tell you, okay, you're infringing on our
that
privacy.
person's private.
Meanwhile, I was just only close to the premises.
Okay, so, and we are not going to take, now imagine that you were not just close to the premises, that you actually wanted to infringe on their right to privacy. How are they going to stop that if they don't have a right to stop you? Do you understand? So I don't really see them as loopholes. I think the problem is that sometimes, right, as citizens, some citizens tend to look for loopholes or create loopholes that are not actually there to their advantage, right? So now someone, and that is, and I think that is what happened in this scenario that you have painted. Even though you are not infringing on their right to privacy, they decided to, you know, say that you have done that. And if we have, I think the solution to all of this is that we have a very active judiciary, right? So even if you are arrested and immediately you get to the police station, there is a human rights lawyer there as provided for by the law, and the human rights lawyer is able to look at the circumstances and say, you know, under 30 minutes, and say, oh no, this is not what happened. This person was not trying to infringe on your rights, and you are allowed to go. You won't feel so bad, right? You won't feel so bad. But when you are kept there for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and you didn't actually commit this offense, that is when you feel that, okay, this is, you feel very bad, and you feel that you feel that, okay, this person is just trying to use the law against you.
Now, I would like us to talk about the current presidential tribunal going on. Now, the court actually ruled against the televisation of the process. Don't you think that is actually a mitigation of the right to information? Because then citizens don't have real-time access. So yeah, I would like us to talk about the current presidential election tribunal going on. The court has actually ruled against the televisation of the court proceedings. Don't you think it's actually preventing the citizens from actually having a real-time information of what is actually going on?
Yeah, well, in a way it does, right? In a way it does, because now when you don't have the live streaming, you don't have real-time updates, whatever you get after that, it may be hard to trust that, okay, this was what actually happened, right? But if you now look at the other angle to it, when now having to do live streaming, you now have, the press now have access to the courtroom, and you look at this particular courtroom that they want to use, you look at the size, you look at how over congested it is already, and then you have people, you know, trying so hard to do this. There will be so much disruption of the processes. So I think what could have been done in that situation is to maybe have just one press. If we can all agree on, okay, so let's have one means of actually getting this information out.
Okay.
With that, we'll be able to keep the sanity of the proceeding itself. But when you now have, it will be as if you are shooting a movie. If you have, I mean, it takes away the sanctity of the proceedings. It's going to disturb the lawyers. It's going to disturb the judges themselves, because this person is trying to capture what the person is saying. That person is trying to capture. I mean, it's serious business that is being done there. So it's only
a case of discretion and perhaps distraction.
That is just what I see.
Maybe there is actually a legal...
I don't want to believe that there is any...
Perhaps legal code.
code. No. I don't want to.
Perhaps there's a legal code against the television of court proceedings.
No. Of course, I mean, for proceedings, right? Because the proceedings have to be done in public, right? But we've never had any proceeding that you have cameras all around. What can be done is after proceedings, you can see the media houses doing interviews and all of that. But for you to now have it in the process of the proceeding ongoing, it disrupts everything. So what the court does is that journalists can be allowed to sit. Everyone have to sit. Like, there has to be decorum. The standard of actually carrying out proceedings have to be done, right? So the law has stated that, okay, this is how proceedings should be done. And in all of that, we don't have anything that says media houses can come in for whatever cases they have and they can start shooting. No, none of that is there, because I believe it's going to disrupt. I can't imagine being a lawyer talking and then someone is carrying camera. So for some people, they can't even focus with all of that distraction, right? So I think what is allowed, so that the judiciary doesn't even infringe on right to people, the media's right to press, and even freedom of information for all citizens, is to allow journalists in limited numbers that can still protect decorum or the sanctity of the proceedings. They can, record, take notes and all of that. But when it comes to, televising it and having cameras, no, I think it's, to an extent, a little bit unhealthy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, we've actually talked about the problem. We've talked about cases surrounding the problem. Now, let's talk about the solution.
Okay.
We have cases where people's rights are being violated. Rights to information, rights to life. What do you think is the solution to that problem from the perspective of the citizen, and perhaps from the perspective of the law?
Okay, so I would say, first of all, information is key, right? So we say the fact that we have these rights, that you have right to life, and people don't even know what it entails. People don't even know what these rights are, what their rights are, what is entailed, right? So it is until you know your rights that you'll be able to say. Now, imagine that when you were trying to do your interview and then they were like, you are infringing on their right to privacy, and you don't even know what that means. You'll be wondering, what are you talking about? I've not done anything wrong. So information is key. If you have the right information, and ignorance is not an excuse in law. So people need to have the right information. They have to have the right knowledge of the law, so that they will know their rights, their duties, and the powers that they have, and the extent of it all. And to the government, I think implementation is key. So it is not just enough that laws have been passed and then we have them in books. There have to be measures to ensure that we are going to truly implement these laws. And lawmakers themselves should be of good standing in a way that it is not enough that you make these laws and then turn back and do something totally different from what you have gone to proclaim, because it's like they are the ones proclaiming it for us, that okay, this is how we should behave. They should also behave in that manner, right? They should set themselves as examples to the citizens.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I would like to go on in the discussion, but our time is actually far spent. Yeah. Before we go, can you give perhaps a parting shot or a goodwill message to our audience?
Okay, so what I would say is that as citizens, let's be law-abiding and let's know our rights. Let's know our rights. So when you get this messages, pass it on to someone else, right? Don't just hold on to it, pass it on to someone else, so that we don't keep getting reports of fundamental human rights abuses. You can also be a human rights activist. It's not by coming out to shout that you are one. You can be it by ensuring that you play your role in protecting the rights of another person.
Thank you very much. There you have it. You should be law-abiding citizens. Know your rights. Don't let it just be all about I'm a rights activist, I'm a human rights activist. Be that person who also takes action. Now, this is where we draw the curtain on the program for today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I hope if I invite you next time, actually,
of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, this is where we wrap up the show for today. Till we come your way again, same time, same station. Khalid, Bada is my name.